Hello, everyone. So welcome back to the next session. I'm so excited to present to you the moderator for the next panel. So we have a panel discussion about behavior of internal stakeholders in project portfolio management and its impact on success. So really we are talking about stakeholder behavior, stakeholder management, which is really key in succeeding your objectives. So I will present you the panel moderator. We have Darshan Shah. So he's the Senior Director of Insight. He's leading cross-functional launch planning and readiness for all late-stage assets in oncology, hematology, and dermatology. He has worked across all phases of drug development from early stage through launch planning. His experience includes both big pharma as well as mid-size biotech companies. I'm so excited that we have Darshan among us, and the floor is yours. I let you introduce your team and go straight to the panel.
Thank you, Mithun. Thank you. Greetings to everybody who's joined this conference. I'm very delighted to moderate this panel discussion with really highly experienced, accomplished panelists who represent a wide range of companies. So we'll start out with Monica Sharma, who works at Ascentage Pharma, a Hong Kong-based company engaged in development of novel therapies for cancers and Hep B, among other diseases. Grace Yu works at EMD Serono, which is a biopharmaceutical business of Merck KGaA, based in Germany. And Merck KGaA, by the way, has been in existence over 350 years. And the interesting fact to note about them is that it is a publicly traded company, but its majority shares are held by a family. And then finally, Matthew Kokkonen works at CSL Behring, which has a history of over 100 years and provides a broad range of plasma-derived and recombinant therapies. CSL is based in Melbourne, Australia. So that's a great panel to have. They represent, as I said, a wide range of companies. And our topic is about the portfolio management and the stakeholder engagement. But we'll touch on some of the other aspects of portfolio management as well, so to bring a wider range of perspectives. So we'll start out with Monica. The Ascentage is, from their website, as I could find, is a science-based, innovation-driven, R&D-focused company. So if you could briefly describe how portfolio management works in this particular type of a setting.
I believe that Monica had some technical difficulties and needed to drop.
Oh, I see. All right. Okay. Yeah, I don't see her. Okay. Let's go to Grace. Meanwhile, hopefully Monica can join us. So EMD, as I mentioned earlier, a part of Merck KGaA, but has multiple therapeutic areas like endocrinology, oncology, neuroscience, and immunology. So from your setting in this particular type of a situation with multiple therapeutic areas, how is like portfolio management performed across all these therapeutic areas, and how do they all come together kind of at the company level?
Yep. So thanks, Darshan, for the question. Can you all hear me okay? Yep.
Yes.
Okay, great. So that's a really interesting question to begin with, right? I think ultimately the decision at the portfolio level, at healthcare level, is done across by our top management. So the C-levels and beyond at an investment board, ad hoc, or as part of the annual strategic planning process, which is a recurring process annually. And then individual TA would also sort of their priorities first, right, which all get rolled up. And our team's role is really to moderate and coordinate that process and bring in that very neutral perspective as almost as the third party or external challenger at guardian of data quality. We help the roll-up process. We help the different TAs really adopt a very standardized methodology across to ensure quality of prioritization. And ultimately, the decision is being made across healthcare at the top level. So I think it's critical to bring in the key. In this case, like the TA leaders would prioritize their respective part, but they oftentimes cannot or are limited, right, in the sense because they wanted to vouch for their own TA. So that's a short answer here. Yep.
Great. And we'll come back to that with respect to the behavior aspect of these stakeholders, especially with the different therapeutic areas. Glad to see you, Monica, back. So I don't know if you heard my question previously, but I'll come back to that question. So Ascentage, as noted in the company website, is a science-based, innovation-driven R&D focused company. And so if you could please describe for us how portfolio management works in this type of a setting.
Monica, we still cannot hear you.
Is it a mute button or something like that?
Can I go ahead and
Yeah,
let's I can jump in here. So from a CSL perspective, I sit in the network strategy part of our organization, and we're very much a crossroads between all of our major functions. We sit kind of focusing more on what we call our end-to-end organization, which is our manufacturing, capital projects, supply chain, external partnerships, etc. But we really do bring the conversation together with R&D and commercial to really establish that long-range plan and make sure that as that pipeline develops over time, that we've got the right enabling capabilities, manufacturing, and that we've got things teed up so that we can ultimately sell that product in that place. And I think the big change that we've seen over the past couple of years is breaking down previous silos and being able to use data more effectively to drive these conversations and make these coordinations more transparent and on demand, as opposed to relying on major events throughout the year to try and coordinate or educate folks on these kinds of practices.
So Matthew, you mentioned about breaking down of the silos, and from our own one-on-one conversations, it was interesting to find that your portfolio management is really supported by all the different functions contributing to the eventual portfolio. I'm sure during this journey you've had to navigate the stakeholder engagement waters. Anything that comes to mind that you might want to share about the stakeholder behaviors, how they have helped, or perhaps you had to kind of face the challenges of navigating through that?
Yeah, I mean, my experience at CSL is much like the other pharmaceutical companies that I've worked with. There's a long legacy of a degree of separation between R&D, manufacturing, and commercial. And I think what we've really tried to do is work through incentives to help people come to the table and understand the value that they get from having that that augmented coordination and collaboration. So it's really first about making solutions that are going to be meaningfully valued to these stakeholders today. I think the second is what a lot of companies try to do, which is making sure that we're really focused on the vision and the mission at hand, and making sure that we're all pulling together in the same direction to achieve our strategic goals. I think this comes both from well-structured, organized, formal engagement, but a lot of engagement on the personal level to help educate folks who have a lot of things going on, a lot of things in their plate, and can understand how this is going to ultimately save time help them and their groups succeed, etc.
Okay. See, Monica is back. Hopefully, the audio is working. So, Monica, if you want to jump in, I see your microphone is muted.
So she's asking if somebody can unmute her. It seems she's muted.
I don't know if there's a way for me. I cannot unmute. Is somebody from backstage? Thomas, are you able to unmute?
Okay, maybe as Monica's figuring this out, I can get started as well on this question.
Sure,
Stakeholder management, Darshan. Yeah, just to save time. So I think that's a really interesting part of portfolio management, right? Because we are really in this unique position of interfacing with so many functions. Same goes with our team, where we interface with R&D, commercial, controlling / finance, BD, as well as manufacturing. So we are in that very unique position of seeing so many things going on and being able to connect the dots. At the same time, I think the critical thing about stakeholder management is where we're contributing and our role to play for each individual activities or processes. For example, on the portfolio review process, which we do annually or biannually, we are leading. And for a lot of those development investment decisions, major ones, we are supporting the team to get a really robust case forward for the investment board. We are not taking stand necessarily, but we really wanted to ensure they present their best case. And then we are actually pressure testing the assumptions going forward, and then ensuring a portfolio view is being generated with insights for our top management. So once we're very clear about the value add of our team, then we can be really strategic about who to engage for what questions and when to bring people along. And I totally agree with Matthew in terms of there's a lot of formal governance when we have a CFO and we really do have a voice, and making sure that voice does come through. And then there's a lot of informal discussions where we need to do the socialization ahead of time. We need to inference even before the meeting has happened. Of course, it's always a balance, right? How much offline alignment you do, because you want it to strive simplicity and strive agility. At the same time, you want to bring people on board. So I think this is a really interesting question, and it's an art, as you put it, Darshan. Ultimately, it's about the impact that our team is achieving collectively with all the stakeholders to maximize the portfolio value, manage the risk, and manage uncertainty within the constrained budget.
Right.
So that's how I see it.
Thank you, Grace. Just wanted to check on the quality. Somebody mentioned that they're hearing different voices at the same time. Is the quality of the audio okay with the listeners? Okay, I'm assuming it is. So continuing on that point, Grace, one of the notable things about this panel is that you guys represent a range of companies, not only in terms of the sizes and their missions, but also their geographies where they're based out of. And so obviously that brings in a cultural element into play with the portfolio management as well. Ascentage, which Monica unfortunately has not been able to speak about much, based out of Hong Kong, as I mentioned earlier. Grace, your company based out of Germany, with a deep history and the CSL Bearing, while based out of Australia, a large amount of business, obviously in the US, and I'm assuming the management also reflects a range of diverse range of management. So how does the cultural aspect come into the play with respect to portfolio management? So Matthew, if you want to take a crack at that.
Yeah, it's really interesting because you've got a pedigree that's quite deep, both in Australia as well as the Bearing lineage that goes to Otto von Bearing, back in the day, in Germany, and we've seen a shift with more and more management based out of the United States. So you've got these elements of different cultural styles and norms that play quite strongly into the mix, and we're quite globally intermixed. So it's been interesting to see how these cultural elements align also with the historic experience of management as they've come in from their experience at other companies, and so it's been interesting to try and navigate those kinds of subtleties and appreciate the differences between what we see in the US, especially with management's experience being a little bit more top down, often common for large pharma in terms of how the style of decision making and communication, versus some of these other regions that have been more insular, and often that been focused on a more consensus-based, collaborative focus, as opposed to more top-down kind of directive styles. So this has been interesting over the past couple of years as we've really come to be that more global matrixed organization, and accounting for someone who's been used to just engaging differently in the conversation.
Okay, thanks, Matthew. Grace?
Yeah, sure. So we do have a European roots, right? For EMD, actually EMD Serono is a U.S. name, is a North America affiliate. So for Merck KGaA. So with that, we have a lot of presence from Europe to begin with. Of course, over the years, we've been increasingly invested in Asia Pacific, North America, for example. So you will see a lot of those focuses from the company going there. And from the workforce perspective, we have a lot of European colleagues. So almost my mornings are usually jam-packed, and almost every call I have would have some European colleague joining in. So from that sense, it's a truly global company. And it's really where you see a lot of diversity, not only in terms of nationality, but other cultural backgrounds. So that makes working really interesting. And I think with that really truly diverse workforce, we are very collegial. We're very collaborative. And I think every company has its own DNA. But for Merck, I find the culture especially appealing because it's very collegial and collaborative in the sense that people are really coming to truly understand and listen. And the other thing, Darshan, you mentioned is we are a company of 350 years or more than that. But with that, we are also owned heavily by the Merck board, Merck family, about 70% of the share. So that also gives us another taste to the company DNA, because we can afford to be a little bit long range. We can afford a little bit more long range view than the quarter by quarter meeting the street expectation type. And we can dare to dabble a little bit in those highly innovative fields and thinking what would come in not only the next 1 to 5 years, but for the next decades or to come. So it's a really interesting mix of old and young, different DNAs or different appetite for innovation. So I think that's really making my day-to-day work really accelerating. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. So that itself has to the old and the young that you mentioned. The point that I think Gil mentioned in his talk previously about the flexibility, interaction with uncertainty, a couple of points that I noted, and that about the portfolio management is an exercise about increasing the probability of assets that would make a greater amount of money and reducing the probability of assets that would lose money. So as you both have navigated the waters of portfolio management with your respective companies, if you could describe one challenge, whether it is implementation of tools, techniques, or stakeholder engagement, and then how you actually went about solving that challenge, or at least approaching a solution to that challenge. So Matthew, if you want to take a crack at it, then we'll come to Grace.
Yeah, I mean, there have been certainly no shortage of challenges, but I think the one where the challenge that we've really overcome that's been, I think, the biggest for us as part of a more transformative globalization is really breaking down historic kind of region-based ways of working and aligning to a more common global way of working, which includes improved transparency. And what that gives us is the ability to make decisions on that affect our global network and be able to accelerate or defer, potentially cancel or bring on something new, and have all of the ramifications to that across, our financial investments, the teams and the resources that we're working on, as well as the enabling projects, and have a much more responsive, clean impact analysis, as well as coordination to redirect those folks, going forward. And for us, we went through the traditional channels, make the case, a lot of theory. We had both internal and consulting effort to try and put together a playbook. But where it really made the difference is when we started investing in BI. And as we got early adopters into to that mix, to show the power of what our BI tools could give these stakeholders, both locally as well as from that global perspective, and the myriads of duplicative processes, effort, complexity, and simplifying that down so that at the end of the day, they could be more successful in what they're doing, focus on the real work as opposed to just administrative overhead. That was really key. So our key learning from that is, we should have tripled down on reporting right out of the gate. Honestly, maybe spend even less time on trying to, woo our stakeholders, and just giving them something that they can really use right out of the gate. Let that peer pressure kind of push other groups that are maybe nervous, or this wasn't as big of a priority for them, to just come on board and be able to take advantage of these capabilities through the portfolio.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Grace, yep.
Yeah,
One
maybe
challenge and how you overcame it. Yep.
Very quickly. So I see we are also closer to the end. So certainly not short of challenges in portfolio management. So when I look at this question, I was thinking, gee, like it doesn't feel like challenges anymore, right? Every day is just different. So I think one notable example is oftentimes the portfolio decisions are made on an ad hoc basis. It's on individual project basis without enough implication at the portfolio level being considered, because they all come at different times if they're not part of the annual strategic process. And then what we did was a multi-pronged approach. Number one, we actually did a large transformation process internally. It's not just by me, but I played a key role in terms of redefining with my manager the portfolio decision science approach by really thinking ahead, the big decisions like 12 to 18 months ahead. So we can prime our top leadership. We can know when a data would come, or when a decision would be made, or when a trigger point would be achieved. So you really have that line of sight with enough lead time, right? So you're not really reactive. And the second thing is we simplify the governance materials a lot, but we emphasize a critical component. So we spent a lot of time working with different stakeholders into defining what the critical components would look like. And we also we did pressure the importance of external assessment. So having some external validation, be it external to the project team or external to the company, to pressure test the assumptions. And our team play as a guardian of data quality going into that entire package, layered on top the portfolio view. So we present a really succinct, simple package to senior leadership. And in the end, they just need to ask very specific questions. So we reduce meeting times. We focus on really the insights and implications at the portfolio, clearing all the technical, regulatory, for example, and commercial assumptions. So I feel that's a win. We've already seen a very good discussions, very tough decisions being made in those top investment board meetings. So I consider that's a big achievement, of course, not by me, but by a lot of people standing behind it. And it's an evolving process. So it's not done in one shot. It's keeping evolving as we speak.
Great, thank you, Grace. So, as our listeners can probably surmise from the points that have been made by both Grace and Matthew, that portfolio management is a very complex exercise, as much art as there is science. So, in the remaining few minutes that we've left, for the benefit of our listeners, if we can kind of summarize 3 key points, each of you, that we would like our audience to take away. So 3 key takeaways. So Grace, you can start that, and Matthew will conclude with you.
Sure. Yeah. So number 1, I think, is always start from the impact, because we're always short of hours in the day, and we're not short of activities. So start with impact and think, is this really going to drive and move the needle in the end for the organization? And the second, I think it's really try to distill the insights into a simpler message, and then think at the portfolio level. And the third is really get to know your stakeholders. I think we didn't talk enough about this one, but every company is so different and stakeholders are different. Keep educating them on the portfolio tools, portfolio concepts. It's a continual process, I'd say. And Matthew has articulated this one already.
All right.
Yeah, those are great points. It's hard to compliment those. I would say, for us, the one of the key points is, provide excellent support to your stakeholders. Become an invaluable partner that really helps make their role easier. And I think this is done predominantly through the data that you can provide. Much like Grace said, keeping that distilled, clear. I think we're trying to push people into more and more pictures and comparative profiles of data, as opposed to staying in tabular, numbers-based data. And then I think the final thing that I would leave is, really keep that end-to-end picture in mind. I think a lot of folks, it's easy to be, very focused, and for all the right reasons, in their space. But, you can't just develop new technologies. You can't just manufacture that product. You can't just sell it, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of pieces that play to really take that, technology from bench to bed effectively. And especially as new capabilities create new challenges and new competitive advantages, that speed to market is really critical, and portfolio management is in a place that doesn't just look at projects. It can really help facilitate that holistic, strategic picture. So don't underestimate the value of what portfolio management can bring to your senior leadership, as well as all the way down to the tactical teams delivering, in terms of really being that crossroads and that glue to keep things moving.
Great. Thank you, Matthew. Monica, I know you were not able to join us, but any last word you might want to share with us?
Still cannot hear you.
For some reason, the audio is... All right, no problem. Hopefully next time we'll be able to have Monica on our panel to have another discussion. But thank you all. That we are at our allocated time, so I guess we will go backstage now.